Good morning or afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to another weather forecast by Adrian's Weather Forecast. And for those who saw my community post, you guys kind of know what today's video is going to be about. In this video, I'm going to be having a very exciting upload, which I have not had in over a month. And this is going to be my second preliminary 2021 and 2022 winter forecast for the United States. Obviously, we're going through the long range forecast. I'm going through the overall expected climatology for the next few months. And then I'm going to have my maps in the very end of the video of what I think we're going to be seeing precipitation wise, temperature wise, and overall. So if you guys want to know what you guys will probably see throughout this winter based on what I'm thinking, then I recommend you guys do watch this video. And again, this is going to be as accurate as I can possibly make it. Again, this is very far out, so take this with a grain of salt. But before I get in the video, I recommend you guys subscribe to the channel as I'm going to be start to have more winter and fall related uploads as we get deeper into the season of fall. As well, be sure to smash that like button and as well hit that bell icon so you guys can get notified as soon as I post a video. But without further ado, let's get into the video. So first thing we want to look at is the ENSO summary forecast as of, I believe this is as of September 13th. This is the latest ENSO update. So ENSO neutral conditions are present at this point. Obviously, however, we are kind of slow, or not, I wouldn't say slowly, but we are now gradually getting towards that La Nina phase. So equatorial sea surface temperatures are near to below average across most of the Pacific Ocean. So you can kind of see at this point now we're seeing most of the Pacific Ocean seeing near to below average conditions or below average SSTs as we see the stronger trade winds and these easterlies persisting and enhancing, and that's going to allow for these waters to continue to become cooler across into as far as the even west central Pacific. And that's going to push all those really warm waters near Indonesia and Oceania. And a transition from ENSO neutral to La Nina is favored in the next couple of months, with a 70 to 80% chance of La Nina during the Northern Hemisphere winter 2021 to 2022. So likely to see an official transition from neutral to La Nina within the next few months. So here's the overall evolution of the equatorial Pacific SSTs and Celsius, and you can see basically this is from 5 north to 5 south, and you can just overall see much of the majority of the central and eastern Pacific is experiencing below average SSTs, with even portions there closer into last year. They were really cold, and obviously they warmed up as we got into the summer months, which obviously is what we typically see. Obviously it's normal for SSTs to warm up as the summer persists, but now as we now get into September, you see now we're getting into those darker colors, now getting up to -2 Celsius below average, so even spots of -3. So gradually seeing as we get into the cooler season, these SSTs are cooling off rapidly. During September 2020 to March 2021, the core of the strongest negative SST anomaly shifted from the eastern to the central Pacific Ocean. From March to July 2021, equatorial SSTs gradually returned to average over much of the Pacific Ocean. And then in the last week, near to below average SSTs continued in the central and eastern central Pacific Ocean. So we're getting very similar to the pattern of last year. So definitely, with basically we all know last year was majority of a La Nina year. So obviously the chance of seeing a La Nina with this very similar pattern is definitely aiming toward a La Nina. So here's the overall look at the latest values on the Nino 1.2 or 1 plus 2, 3, 3.4, and 4 values. So we do have a -0.4 Celsius value in the Nino 3.4 region. So we are definitely really getting close to this La Nina, because obviously we all know La Nina is from -0.5 to below. So we are within -0.1 Celsius that actually gains to La Nina status. But obviously you have to keep that status or even below that status for a few weeks to actually have an official La Nina. And that's why right now we are at a La Nina watch. But you can see that really the Nino 1 plus 2 is still rather warm right now. Still seeing those warm waters not being pushed from South America further into the Western Pacific, but overall we are still seeing the gradual, really cold waters across Niña 4 to Niña 3 region. However, again, these waters will continue to cool down, including Niña 1 plus 2. So you can just overall see that we did see a decrease in the SSTs that were August, September, but right now we're experiencing a very, very small warm up. You can just see how cold the waters got, obviously, into the overall winter months for all these regions, and then they really, really warmed up, specifically 1 plus 2. They really all warmed up during April, May, and June, even a little bit July. Actually got really warm in July for all of these months. Look at July there for Nino 1 plus 2. And then obviously now we're going to see a decrease as we get into the cooler months, and even a slight decrease in 1 plus 2. So definitely starting to see the overall gradual development of these waters. So here's the overall look at the last 4 weeks and how the overall SSTs have been averaging out. And you can just overall see really, really cold waters across much of the eastern and central Pacific. And there you see this is actually getting to the La Nina pattern. If once these waters off South America near Nino 1 plus 2 actually cool off, we could very well start seeing now La Nina, because look at the really, really warm waters. As you see, the stronger trade winds, the easterlies pushing all of that cold all that cold water pretty far into the western Pacific, and that's allowing for all that warm water to be pushed anywhere but the Indonesia and Papua New Guinea and Australia region, as well near that general vicinity. So it's going to be kind of moving into Southeast Asia and portions of Oceania. And we're already seeing that as of September 11th. We're starting to see really, really warm waters up to degrees Celsius already across that general vicinity near Papua New Guinea, near the Indonesia area. And as well starting to see some warm waters not too far off New Zealand. So really, really starting to see this pattern kind of starting off as we see it right now, though, in place the MJO, and as well as seeing the overall really, really actually look at the overall OLR for you guys here. But before we get into the OLR, you can kind of see the gradual development of these colder waters. You can see they were kind of really cold on August 16th, and now they warmed up a little bit at the end of August, and now we're starting to get cooling off once again. So let's actually get to the overall tropical OLR, basically, which is the overall hold on, I actually forgot what the OLR stood for. I will get to you guys what the OLR means in a second, but it's basically looking at the overall long wave radiation. I believe it's ocean long wave radiation. I believe that's what it stands for, because I know it's definitely about long wave radiation. So basically, with the negative OLR anomalies, you see enhanced convection and precipitation. So basically, you're seeing the increase in the overall tropical-like weather, and seeing a lot of rain in the monsoon season as well. So you're going to see those enhanced trade winds. So you're going to be seeing kind of the strong monsoon waves across portions of Indonesia, across portions of Papua New Guinea, across portions of the overall vicinity of Southeast Asia, including Brunei. I'm trying to think of other areas within Southeast Asia. Even the very, very tip of Vietnam, you can start seeing those kind of monsoon waves. It's exactly what we're seeing right now. As of August 11th to September 5th, we saw negative OLR anomalies across specifically the areas where you see La Nina patterns across Indonesia and that general vicinity. And then we saw positive OLR kind of across the Pacific, Eastern Pacific, because obviously it's going to be dry but cold across the Eastern Pacific, and same story there for portions of the far eastern portions of the far eastern boundaries of the Western Pacific and kind of near the Central Pacific area. But yeah, showing you we are starting to see that precipitation continue. That's obviously part because we are seeing the MJO right now in place in the Western Pacific. So that's why we're kind of helping aid to this development of the La Nina, because we're seeing the extreme monsoon season across the Western Pacific, which you see in the La Nina, and seeing really dry weather but colder weather across the Eastern Pacific as well. That is taking part as well, not only with the MJO but the overall enhancing of the easterly trade winds. You can kind of see right here, seeing enhanced easterly trade winds which are obviously taking a lot of that moisture and that warmer air, which is going to start rising. It's just going to allow, again, for that MJO right there. So I think we spent enough time explaining the ENSO outlook. We already spent 10 minutes on that, so this video is going to be rather extensive. But here's the overall look at the probability on the ENSO forecast. And obviously by August, September, October, we now have a leading chance for La Nina at about 63% for La Nina. And then we peak all the way to November, December, January. So as we go from here, August or September now, all the way up to November, December, and January, we're going to start seeing an increase in the probability for La Nina, getting up to as high as a 80%, almost an 80% chance for La Nina. So that's a lot more confidence than what we saw in the last ENSO forecast. I believe the last ENSO forecast, the max was like 75%. But after November, December, January, we start to see a decrease in probability of La Nina because obviously as the SSTs warm up, or as the weather warms up, we get into tropical weather, or at least not tropical weather, but we get towards developing tropical weather, because obviously that's going to be March, April, May, and then April, May, and June, because obviously the EPAC season starts May 15th, so that's starting to get into the tropical season, and then waters will warm up, and we're going to get to the ENSO probability, but still, although it declines, we're still going to be seeing a really high chance for La Nina all the way from January, February, and March with a let's see here, I believe a 60%, yeah, 60% right there. So either way, really high probability of La Nina from basically now to the end of winter. So we're likely to see La Nina persist that the whole season of I guess winter. So here's the overall probability forecast. So you can kind of just overall see the increase from now on to December, November, December, January. So that's obviously kind of being the very beginning or the beginning phase of winter. So we're most likely going to be seeing our really strong characteristics of La Nina by the time we get towards December and January and into the late fall season, October. We're going to start seeing the overall La Nina characteristics start to overall be seen and be, I guess, felt across the United States and even across the Pacific. So although we may not get an official La Nina maybe till October, maybe, we're going to continue to start seeing the effects here with obviously the tropical weather across the Western Pacific, seeing these enhanced trade winds, easterly trade winds. So we're kind of already starting to see the characteristics of that. But 79%, a 79%. And look at that, there's 0% for El Nino within any of these. So it's going to be all on either La Nina or neutral. And neutral is at 21%. And then it continues to decrease as the waters start to warm up. So by January, February, and March, a 60%, and then finally the neutral surpasses by the time we get towards February, March, and May. But look at that, 11% there for El Nino. It's the highest probability we've had for an El Nino in a while here, but that's definitely a very interesting latest update here. So really a lot more confidence within La Nina. And again, here's the historical 3.4 Caesar temperature anomaly. So obviously the waters were really dramatically cold in the late January time frame, as well really cold overall throughout the winter. But then we saw a huge warm up actually, and actually I just realized this is actually throughout the years. So January 20, you can kind of see the dramatic decrease in the overall SST. So we kind of saw basically El Nino years throughout 14 here. I believe 2014 and 15 was actually an El Nino, and I think I remember being it a El Nino year because I saw 2014 Snowmageddon in 2014, and that was just an absolute monster storm that you typically just see with an El Nino. And same thing even with the February windstorm Yuri in Texas. Although that was throughout a La Nina year, we were seeing El Nino characteristics actually. So it wasn't an El Nino, but it was characteristics more of an ENSO neutral. But you can see the overall decrease we are seeing the SSTs since January of 2020. So here's the overall look now at the 850 HPA zonal wind anomalies. So we're looking at these straight wind zonal wind anomalies, which typically kind of just look at for the steering patterns. So the negative VPU, which is going to be anywhere from the blues to the purples, is indicating easterly winds or easterly steering. while the oranges would be kind of favoring westerlies. Westerlies obviously would be going that way, and then easterlies would obviously be steering this way. So for obviously MJOs, you basically really want to see kind of winds go from west to east, because obviously they move eastward obviously, but within uh obviously the enhanced trade winds, the winds go from east to west, so that's considered easterlies, and then westerlies for kind of MJO and Kelvin waves because they go eastward. But here's the overall look at the zonal wind anomalies. So kind of here we are starting right here. Actually, we're starting right here, September 18th. And I believe that the Pacific is like 100 east to like right here, 120 west. So you can see the overall much of the central Pacific will continue to see these enhancing easterly winds being obviously throughout the trade winds. That's going to continue to help produce these overall SSTs being pushed to the west. So seeing those cooler waters, and that should help as well. As we get in the cooler season, the warm waters off South America will naturally just cool off. Like we don't really need to see anything too crazy with that. But the cold waters will start to really push westward if these easterly winds continue as well. We're seeing a lot of negative VPUs because of the MJO in place. So we're seeing a lot of overall initiation and storms going on right there across the Western Pacific as well. So here's the overall look at the velocity potential 200 anomaly. So seeing obviously a lot of negative VPUs, kind of just really indicating really strong around convection going on there as well, a lot of initiation. And here's the overall look at the MJO. So obviously the MJO is in place across the Western Pacific right now and likely continue to stay pretty stationary throughout the next few weeks across the Western Pacific. So that's really helping allow for this whole monsoon type weather across the Western Pacific and that drier weather and less favorable weather as you go further east. So seeing a lot of overall kind of warming weather rising, that warm air really rising, and seeing a lot of the overall strong storms as one enhanced probabilities for tropical weather across the Western Pacific at this point. So before I actually get into the actual climatology models throughout the next few months for the United States and even the Pacific, I want to just show you guys what a typical La Nina pattern would bring. Obviously, La Ninas are different. Like last year was completely different. It was like an El Nino type pattern. Because we saw like multiple deep southern snowstorms. But here's the overall average type climatology pattern you'd see within La Nina. So obviously you're gonna be seeing um, dry and cool weather across Nina 1+2. That's gonna continue even to the Central Pacific. So it's gonna be dry and cool all across this whole region, basically. Because obviously you see, uh, let me just give you an example. The trade winds. So you're gonna be seeing really strong trade winds. So all these cool waters will actually push as far as the central equatorial Pacific, even getting close to the Western Pacific. You kind of split it in half, and they get really close to the Western Pacific actually, and that's gonna allow for all that wet and even warmer water to be pushed into Oceania and into Southeast Asia. So Papua New Guinea, Australia, um, Indonesia, for example, Malaysia is another one. The Philippines as well could start seeing some action. So as you see, that really warm air is going to start rising. You see that cold air kind of be pushed this way, and the warm air rises here across the southeast Pacific, allowing for that really stormy weather. That's as will even affect portions of Japan. And then that warm air is going to come rise, and that's going to go towards the United States, and then it's going to drop again as colder weather. So it's going to kind of be an overall pattern. I believe it's called the Walker pattern. I believe that's what it's called. I'm not 100% sure. I'm pretty sure it's called, I think, the Walker the Walker pattern or something like that, and that's exactly what's going to cause that type of pattern. So for the United States, that's going to be pretty dry across the southeast United States because of that subtropical jet being placed further northward, and then you see the Rossby waves and the jet kind of dipping this way, and that's going to allow for all that cool and wet weather for the northern United States. So that's where we're going to be seeing typical wet weather across the Ohio Valley, wet weather across the Pacific Northwest. As well, other patterns you typically see like this is within, I believe, within a negative Pacific negative PNA, basically, where you see really the high pressure being pretty far west in the North Pacific Ocean into the Bay of Alaska, and that's going to allow for pretty strong ridge here, and that's going to allow for the jet to dip this way, and then another ridge in place right here, the southeast ridge. So that's typically what you'd see here within a positive PNA. So kind of when you see positive PNA, you kind of see La Nina type characteristics for just the United States, not really much of the Pacific like a La Nina where it's like worldwide effects, but the PNA as well are bringing this type of effect here. So here's a better example by NOAA. So there you see that, like I said, the higher pressure is going to be really far west within the basically the Gulf of Alaska, typically with a negative PNA and kind of typically short wave like El Nino type characteristics. You see the high pressure all the way over here, and that's going to allow for this kind of the dip all the way right here. That's going to allow for that cold air to get into the deep southeast, which actually we're about to see here within the pattern right now, actually, which is allowing for that snow in the Rockies right now. It's exactly an example of a negative PNA, or sorry, a positive PNA, where it's this high pressures are kind of pushing to the Pacific Northwest, and it's going to allow for this Pacific jet to just really dip really far down the United States. But the further west that blocking high is, basically the further west this jet will stay, and that's obviously going to allow for kind of just that blocking ridge, southeast ridge, to stay in place. Because obviously, the typical patterns like this, it's like a Rossby wave. You see the low pressure here, the high pressure here, the low pressure here, and the high pressure here. So if we go like this, the high pressure here, bum 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 bum. Oops, I did that wrong. Let me do that again. So we kind of go like this. There you see the blocking ridge, or the blocking ridge across the Bay of Alaska. There you see the lower jet kind of dipping it, and there you see the little rise like that, and then you see like that. There you see the high pressure basically in place across the southeast United States, and there you see the jet kind of coming in, allowing for that cold weather and that cold front. So typically you see again the polar jet stream within the Rossby wave, and there you see the Pacific jet stay pretty far north, and that's why it's going to be so dry across the United States, because there's basically no precipitation south of where the Rossby wave and the overall Pacific jet meets. It's going to kind of stay to the north of that Rossby wave. So typically north of the Rossby wave, so the furthest south it stays, the Rossby wave gets, basically the better conditions for the deep south, and then the further north its Rossby wave stays, and the further north its Pacific jet meets, the better for the north central United States. So here's the overall look at the total accumulated precipitation anomaly here from the climatology model, looking at CANSIPs. We will also, I think we have time. I'm not sure. We're at 23 minutes right now. I think we will have time to maybe look at the CFS, but we'll see. So here's the overall look at September. So again, really, this is just a really good looking pattern you typically see within the La Nina. A really good amount of, really well above average precipitation and monsoon season going on the western Pacific and southeast Atlantic, and again warm weather across the eastern Pacific, and then seeing cooler weather across the Niña 1+2 region. So that's exactly what you typically see. And then as we continue throughout December, we can continue to see this persist further south when you're Papua New Guinea, Oceania, and it continues to see the really dry weather across the central and eastern Pacific, and that's going to continue to allow. But as we now get to February and then March, you kind of see this monsoon season kind of starting to diminish, and that's why that probability for La Nina will decrease as we get further into the late winter and early spring season. Here's the overall look at now. You can kind of see the United States. You're seeing the above average precipitation just for the Ohio Valley in the west, like you typically see in the drier weather in the south central and the southeast. Same thing by January, above average precipitation there for the Great Lakes and the Pacific Northwest. but then below average precipitation there across the southeast and specifically the southwest. So you're just seeing the really winter conditions already. Here's you ever look at March, actually more precipitation becoming widespread across the south, but there you see that blocking high the southeast, and then basically it's looking very accurate, like the overall forecast. Um, let's now look at the overall. What should we look at here? Actually, I think we're gonna be looking at the two temperature anomaly as well. So again, going to be rather warm across the western Pacific within the La Nina months, and very, very cool across the eastern Pacific and central Pacific. That's exactly what we're going to be seeing here. I mean, really, really cooling off there by January across northwestern America, South America right now. Because obviously it's kind of a little bit warm in that general vicinity, but you can kind of see how this cold weather is pushing eastward within those trade winds. I mean, look where it is here by November, but look where it is in October. So this is November, this is October, and then we go now by September. Look at September now. I mean, you can see how it persists to move westward over time. So it's kind of showing you that we are persisting and enhancing within these La Nina conditions. And here's the overall look at the SST anomaly from the CANSIP, so you can kind of see how these really cold waters, specifically by November, start to really persist, and actually they're really, really well below average waters, saying, I mean, nearly negative 2 degrees Celsius below average, which is basically a good, what, 6 degrees Fahrenheit, maybe? I'm not, it's like, actually, no, actually not, I have no idea. That'll be 2 degrees Celsius. How much even is 2 degrees Celsius? Wow, I'm really blanking right now, because what? 2 degrees Celsius, what is that? I have no idea what 2 degrees Celsius is in Fahrenheit. Like, I'm really good with knots to miles an hour, but with Celsius to Fahrenheit, I am no good. But basically, 2 degrees Celsius, so really well below average waters across the Pacific. But let's do the comparison again. So here are the kind of how far the below average waters go throughout September. So they kind of stop right here, basically. Then by October, they're right here. And then by November, they're really stretching out like here. And you can kind of see the overall gradual development, and as well these cold waters start to expand as well a little bit. You can kind of see they kind of expand. And this is literally December as well. You can kind of see they expand a little bit. But you can overall see the really warm waters across Oceania and the Southwest Pacific. And so yeah, this is basically showing you that we are looking at definitely a La Nina. Last thing I want to look at is the overall actual US 500 millibar height. So we now get kind of towards really the winter months here. So kind of by December, you kind of see you see that high pressure is going to be not too far west. It is that really strong blocking high. So you see that really strong ridge basically like that. And then you're going to be seeing the low level jet dipping. And actually, this is actually not too shabby. This could very well be a pretty good snowmaker in December if we see that really cold air pushing in with that overall trough. That's going to allow for some really cold weather to be persisting across the Midwest. So we could even see maybe this go all the way up into the Appalachian Mountains. But there you see the high pressure for the southeast ridge. There you see this pattern like this basically. Or it's let me do that again. Basically, it's more like this to kind of dip like that and then like that. So that's kind of what it's going to be kind of looking like with that high pressure here, low pressure here, and high pressure here, basically. That's December. By now, January. Again, obviously, the CANSIP likes to be pretty warm biased like the CFS, but there you see the high pressure right here. And you can kind of see a little jet like that. Could be seeing some cooler air, but it's going to be rather warm according to this month. And then by March, starting to see that really strong high pressure continuing across the southeast United States. And there you see the high pressure way up here, so not going to be seeing too much going on anywhere for the eastern United States, but a little bit going on there for the Pacific Northwest. So let's look at the overall. Let's see here. Surface temperature anomaly. So again, it's going to be pretty warm March, and we're going to be seeing a pretty overall decent December like I was talking about across the Northwest, but a lot of these love being warm biased, and obviously it's very far out, so this is definitely not accurate. So let's now go look at the map here. So this is my precipitation map. This is kind of going off basically what all we looked at with a little bit more of that. Honestly, if I include more, this video would be so long. But here's the look at the precipitation forecast. So let's go ahead and start again. Let's go ahead and just jump into it. So in the very light shaded green, that's slightly above average precipitation. So I think honestly a lot is going to kind of just be north and south, kind of split within the United States. Typically, you kind of see that go split within the east and west United States, but the case is to be split like that basically. We're gonna be seeing a very big difference between the North United States and the South United States this year and this winter. So, and that light green, we're seeing slightly above average precipitation. Based on what we looked at, it looks like the best pattern for above average will remain within the northern portion of the United States here. We're not gonna be seeing much going on as a subtropical jet from the Pacific will stay pretty far north. So a lot of that precipitation is going to stay near the Ohio Valley, near the northwest, near the Central Plains. So that's where I think that's why I have such a big area of slightly above average precipitation. And the second shade of green, that's going to be moderately above average precipitation. So obviously, really looking at for overall good amount of moisture across the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley, as well really good amount of moisture there across the Pacific Northwest. And that purple shade of color for the above average, that's well above average precipitation. I think we can all agree that the Pacific Northwest will get the most amount of precipitation this winter. I mean, it's going to get constant moisture, whether it's rain, snow, mix, whatever. It's going to be constant precipitation. The other completely different story there for the South United States. Going to be seeing obviously that strong southeast ridge in place. So going to be seeing really dry and warm weather throughout much of the month or throughout much of the season. However, again, there is still changes for snowstorms and cold fronts every so often. But and the first shade of dark brown is going to be slightly below average precipitation. So obviously all the way from the mid-Atlantic to the southwest. So it's basically coast to coast. So it's basically pretty self-explanatory. It's going to be very dry. Not going to be seeing anything really south of the Pacific jet. So it's going to be really dry. And the second shade is going to be a lot drier. It's going to be a lot noticeable. Like we're going to be seeing from maybe 5+ inches below average. So it's going to be very noticeable. And then within that last shade of that below average, it's going to be absolutely just miserable. I mean, if this actually verifies, this will be very miserable for those in the Southwest. I mean, it's going to probably be even a drought threat across the winter. So definitely be a pretty big concern as well for even fire weather persisting in the fall. Here's the overall look at my winter temperature anomaly. So definitely a lot of colors here. And it's kind of very similar to the precipitation, again, basically split within the south and north. So in that dark blue color, that's slightly below average temperature. So obviously going to be seeing frequent polar jets and even a few clippers. And that's going to really possibly go as far south as the Kentucky line with Tennessee. And after that's going to just really fall apart. Obviously, we're going to be seeing cold fronts across specifically the southeast here. I mean, the cold front for the southwest will be very uncommon throughout this part of the winter. But for the southeast, obviously, cold fronts are a lot more likely, so that's why it's kind of not as crazy within the colors. But overall, though, throughout the whole average of the season, I don't think we're going to be seeing really below average across the southeast here. So it's going to be really cold, even from the Great Lakes there to the Ohio Valley. So you're going to be seeing that cold air kind of specifically reach all the way over there. And that dark blue mainly be kind of be the very edge of the Arctic blast and the overall Arctic air persisting and dipping into the United States. While in the purple, it's going to be a lot colder than the dark blue. I mean, it's going to be very noticeable. We're going to be seeing a few degrees below average every single month. Very frequent Arctic blast and overall Arctic polar air just dipping in and invading the United States. So you're going to really start to see noticeably cold air. And if you're in that dark purple, and then if you're in that pink color, oh boy, I hope you have jackets over there. I mean, you better do, because you better have jackets, and I mean, you better have multiple jackets, because it's gonna be an absolute brutal winter for you guys in that purple and that pink color. I mean, we're gonna be seeing clippers. We're gonna be seeing Alberta Clippers, Saskatchewan or Saskatchewan Screamers. I mean, we're gonna be seeing a lot of that good stuff this winter. So I'm gonna be seeing some good winter storms. I mean, we're seeing windstorm basically today to tomorrow for this area across the Rockies. I mean, it's gonna be continuing to see really cold there. I mean, consider this: we're already seeing 19, even 18 degrees across areas in this color already in September. I mean, just think about that. So imagine what it'll be like into the winter. And here's the overall forecast for the winter. So hope you guys, hope this is appealing to you guys, and I hope it's let me actually move my screen a little bit so you guys don't get cut off and ignore it. There we go. So let's go ahead and start with the warm and dry area. So if you see a really, I mean, this is going to be a very extensive region from basically the North Carolina to California. We're going to be seeing warm and dry. I mean, it's going to be kind of, like I said, split south and north. So a lot of that southern United States is going to be just really warm and dry. But where it's going to be really, really warm and dry is going to be the Southwest, from California, Nevada, Arizona, all the way to Texas. It's going to be very, very warm and dry. While to the north of all that warm air, it's going to be a little bit cooler. If you guys look at my map, my temperature anomaly, it's going to be a little bit cooler in this area right here. And that's where I have my wintry mix. So the wintry mix is basically all type of things can happen, whether it's sleet, snow, ice. I mean, all that is definitely a possibility here across. I mean, look at last year. I put a wintry mix into Dallas last year for a La Nina, and look what happened. They got snow. So that's all those going to be La Nina. You can't rule the possibility for a snowstorm or two in the South Central. I mean, it's not going to be like deep La Nina conditions for the whole 4 months. So that's why I have a wintry mix all the way from basically New Mexico and Texas all the way up to even Virginia. In that white color across the eastern United States, and you see that mountain snow for the Appalachians, or all the way from northeast Georgia, where I am, all the way up into Harrisburg, into Roanoke, into areas all the way up to the Adirondacks and upper Appalachians. In that hot pink color for the East Coast, and be seeing nor'easters. Obviously, this is a very common thing every year. Um, in that area there, near the overall northeast United States and Ohio Valley, we're going to be seeing as well a chance for clippers. I mean, clippers and clippers and clippers going to be seeing really, really cold air. So obviously there's different shades though of the clippers, because obviously the kind of more intense part of that clipper will remain across the north and Midwest. But however, these clippers will obviously push their way southeastward and make their way all the way up to the Ohio Valley. And that's why I think we could very well see a decent Ohio Valley and as well a very good snow season and overall winter across this area. I think we can very well see a really good winter for these areas, because with the really cold air and as well the above average precipitation across this area, we're talking about some really good snow across the Ohio Valley, Great Lakes, and overall Midwest. So I think we can see a very, very snowy winter for these areas as well. Um, so now as we go into the purple shaded color, very cold. So they're going to be saying really cold weather. It's pretty self-explanatory. And then the white color for the western United States, going to be mountain snow with the Rockies and Sierras. And then in the Pacific Northwest, going to be seeing cold and wet. But I hope you guys enjoyed this really long video, and I'll see you guys later.